and players, teams, matches that kind of stick in our memory.
So there is one first aspect about the Anglo-Italian Cup. We don't want to glamorize exactly this aspect, but this aspect was violence, right?
Violence both on and off the pitch. So I think it was, especially in the 70s and also in the 90s, it was a time where violence in the UK, like the hooliganism scene, was quite big, and I think it's the same in Italy. And also it was a clash of cultures on the football pitch. So I think English football was still very physical. Italian football was very physical. And I think it maybe led to more red cards and more antagonism than you might get nowadays.
Which is funny, because if you think of the structure, it sounds cute. Oh my God, we're going to give third-tier teams the opportunity.
Friends, right?
Let's be friends. No, exactly the opposite. In Italy, in the 1970s, it was a pretty tough time of the country's history. They went down to history as the Anni di Piombo, years of lead. They were a period of social and political turmoil. There was a lot of terrorism, both on the left wing of politics and on the right wing of politics. And that's the 1970s are the time when the ultras, the Italian hooligans, we could say, started organizing themselves and became big. They became a thing. So it's no surprise that this violence also leaked into the Anglo-Italian Cup.
And as we know, England have always had a history of hooliganism. They've always been, for foreign hooligans, they've always almost been the role model to follow. So I imagine a lot of fans quite eager at the opportunity to go abroad and challenge themselves against other idiots, I suppose. But there are two instances that stick out in particular. The first final between Napoli and Swindon at the San Paolo had to be abandoned in the 75th minute. So Swindon were 3-0 up 69 minutes into the game, and the Neapolitans decided they'd had enough. They didn't want to watch their team lose anymore. So a quote from Reuters at the time says, "A fanatical section of the 55,000 crowd, incensed by the inability of Napoli to match the craft and finishing of Swindon Town, went berserk during the latter stage of the Anglo-Italian tournament final in Naples last night. They showered the pitch with beer bottles and stones. An Austrian referee, Paul Schiller, called the players off 11 minutes from time." Now, there was reportedly £20,000 worth of damage done to the stadium. There were around 60 people arrested, 100 people injured. They were throwing benches, they were throwing concrete, they were throwing everything they could get onto the pitch. The players had to be removed for their own safety. Okay, so it sounds like quite an interesting atmosphere to be in. I'm not sure if Naples has changed much,
But it's not only about Naples, because years later, almost 20 years later, something similar happened in Ancona, in central Italy, which is very close to my hometown, Osimo. What happened there?
So this is something you can find footage of this on YouTube. In Birmingham, we're playing in Ancona, and one of the players, Paul Tate, reacted particularly badly to a tackle. This resulted in a full team brawl that spilled on after the final whistle. One of the managers ended up in hospital with a fractured cheekbone. There was warrants out for the players' arrests. The Birmingham players had to run with their passports to the airport to get on a plane. And up until 2000, some of them still had warrants out for their arrest in Italy.
And it was very interesting to see goalkeeper Orlandoni talk about the opposition players. And when he's interviewed, they ask him, "So how were you feeling on the sideline?" He just said, "I don't know, man. They didn't look like humans. They felt more like animals."
Racist. Racist.
But yeah, so it's not only about violence on and off the pitch, because this competition also included some great players.
Exactly. So now we're going to talk about the positive side, the nice things that came out of this tournament. So I managed to find on a website called Anglo-Calcio, I believe it was called. He compiled a greatest 11 of players who represented Italian teams. So I'm going to take you through this team.
All right.
And I'll be honest, I'd be happy taking this side out every week, right?
Let's go.
So in goal, Toldo for Fiorentina, 93-94. You have a defence of Montero, Materazzi, and Giuliano. No, I think...
Giuliano, Montero, and Materazzi. Right, this defensive lineup is illegal
I think
in 30 countries.
Montero is one of the roughest defenders I've ever seen.
Well, Materazzi is a fairy. No, I mean, Giuliano, Montero, and Materazzi, they are three defenders that you don't want to run into. Absolutely not. Oh, my God. Well, it's pretty impressive. It's a pretty solid defense.
I think it's a good start. That's a good start.
Considering Toldo. And then if we move to midfield, we have Hagi, who played for Brescia
Georgie Hagi
in the 1993-1994 season. Current Juventus manager, Andrea Pirlo.
Who played at Ipswich. He made an 11-minute cameo at Ipswich, and I'm sure the fans there still remember and still say, I saw Andrea Pirlo play.
Yeah, at the time he was at Brescia. Then we've got Heffenberg, who used to play at Fiorentina from 1993 to 1994. And then finally, Ambrosini, whom I didn't even recall played for Cesena from 1994 to 1995. What do you think about the midfield?
I like that midfield. Plenty of creativity. Georgie Hagi was one of those players, again, that you saw him at World Cups and you're like, he seemed like from another planet almost. Like now we can see football from other countries whenever we want. Then you couldn't see it. You saw these players at a World Cup, really, or Euros, that was it. So I think... yeah, what a player. And Pirlo, of course, I think we talked about him last week. We can't talk about him much more, I don't think.
Should we have one day an episode on
where
about
we don't talk about maybe one episode where we don't talk about
one where we don't talk about it and one where we only talk about it.
He's going to come up every episode, I think.
And then finally, the attack.
So this attack is incredible. We've got Christian Vieri, El Bomber, right? He calls himself. Who played for Pisa and Venezia. He scored against Bristol City and against Wolverhampton. We then have Oliver Bierhoff.
Oh, Bierhoff.
Who is the competition's highest scorer with 9 goals across 3 years.
Sorry, quick random fact. Bierhoff, you know the Panini albums?
Yes.
Panini football albums? Bierhoff was one of the very first ever stickers that I got for that album. Yeah, I remember that.
I always remember playing him on FIFA. He was so good. He was so good. He scored a hat-trick against Swindon in the semi-final, but unfortunately his team went on to lose against Notts County. And the final striker, one of my favourite strikers of all time, Batigol.
Oh, yes.
Who played for Fiorentina and scored a brace against Southend in front of a massive 2,000 people at the Artemio Franchi, I believe it is, the stadium.
Yeah,
yes.
Yeah.
And then the manager, again, an absolute hero, Carlo Ancelotti, who was in charge of Reggiana in 95-96. And fair to say, this cup wasn't his priority. They went on to do very well in the league, but they didn't last long in this competition. But we'll let you off, Carlo. We'll let you off.
But this is so interesting. You see, such a strange tournament featuring so many world-class players. It's
genuinely world-class.
It's
players.
Great. And when we did all the researching throughout this week, it was interesting because it felt many of these games, they feel like you're playing with a mate in FIFA and you say, hey, why don't you pick your hometown club? And I'll pick my hometown club. And then we'll play, I don't know, Napoli-Swindon or something like that. It's the matchup.
When you see some of the games like Crystal Palace, Inter, or you see like Cesena, Manchester United, like when did these two teams meet? Like how did this happen? I think it all just adds more to the romance of it.
But what was the logic behind the teams who participated in the tournament?
So originally in the 70s, I spent a lot of time trying to research this, and I couldn't see a method to how the teams got picked. I believe
you did a lot of researching in the 70s.
Yeah, I believe. Yeah, well, in the 70 period, and I believe it was just an invitational originally. But then when it came back in the 90s, it was all 24 teams in then the first division, now championship. They would all play each other in one-off games until there were 8 teams left. And it was the same situation in Serie B, but obviously with less teams, but until 8 teams were left. Then, now this is where it gets complicated, guys, they were put into groups of 4, which would have 2 Italian teams and 2 English teams, but the English teams would only play the Italian teams and vice versa. Then they were put into 2 leagues of English and Italian, and the top 2 English and Italian teams would progress to the semi-finals. I totally get it. If I've lost you, it took me a long time to get my head around this.
But it's not even the craziest of rules, because we dug deeper, and what did we find?
So in the 70s, it was obviously at the time 2 points for a win, 1 point for a draw, 1 point for every goal scored, and offside only counted in the penalty box.
Well, Bayern Munich would really appreciate the first rule, and Filippo Inzaghi would appreciate the second one, right?
That high press, you can go as high as you want. It doesn't matter. Let's just hang around the outside of the box. You'll be fine. But I think it says something about this competition as well, that it was there to experiment. It was there to kind of see what could be done with tournaments, how things could be worked. I think, again, we use the word pioneeristic, right? I think this guy was a bit of a visionary and tried to just see what could be done between two FAs. And I'm sure that there was something learnt from this tournament that other tournaments took with them. I would quite enjoy the point for every goal, because it did result in 66 goals in 35 games, I believe, in one of the years. So there was 10 nils, there was 4 alls, there was 5 threes. It was just all-out attack. And I feel like this sounds like great fun to watch.
Once again, it feels like FIFA, in the most recent version, I'm not much of a gamer, but I believe there was an option that you could remove the referee from the pitch or something like that.
Yeah. There was always a hack you could run away and not get carded, and there's plenty of
I honestly, so from the information that we gathered, this tournament was played throughout the seasons during the year. I think it would be fun to reintroduce it as a shorter summer tournament where teams, between Championship and Serie B, that would be great, because I think Serie B, I don't know much about this championship, but the Serie B is a great league, very competitive, highly competitive, with many good players. Sometimes the games in the Serie B are even better than the games in Serie A, because they really fight to come up, instead of in the Serie A many times they fight not to go down, so you're more defensive.
It's something that's often said about the Championship, is that it's the most entertaining league in England, because there's always one team that's mid-table and makes a late charge for the playoffs, and then they usually get promoted, or there's a team that's second, drops to third, and then they've ruined the next season. It's very competitive, and I think it would be amazing to see something like this back. Obviously, it would never happen, but I feel like for the supporters of second division or lower league teams, it would be quite nice to be able to play European teams. They're trying to bring in this European conference below the Europa League. If they want the European Super League, just let every division play teams from every country. Why not? It makes it a bit more interesting. I don't know. I really like this idea. I really like this.
You can be Rory Criscuolo, the new Gigi Peronace. That would be sweet.
I just need to get some connections first. If anybody knows anyone,
that's good.
Go.
For now, you've got an Anglo-Italian connection.
That's it.
So we really hope you enjoyed our story about the Anglo-Italian Cup. For us, it was a lot of fun to do all the research. It was quite difficult and frustrating at times.
It took a long time, but I really enjoyed reading about it, and more importantly, I enjoyed talking about it. So that's good.
You can find a lot of highlights of the games on YouTube. Unfortunately, there is no documentary about the Anglo-Italian Cup. If you are a movie maker, a director, I don't know, give it a thought. I think it would get in touch. We will star in the movie. So Rory will star as Haji, and I will star as Toldo. I have no idea what we could do. But before we say goodbye to you, I'm still thinking of a player who is the first one from his country. The second from his country to ever play in Serie A. And he played for Perugia and the Bolton Wanderers.
And he was born in 1977.
All right. In January, right?
In January. Good,
right.
Good memory.
Thank you. We are ready to unveil. I'm not very ready to guess, but I think Rory is ready to unveil the player.
I'm ready.
Let's go.
Okay, welcome back, listeners. We are at the final part of Rory's game. Tommaso looks nervous and a bit clueless, so let's go. What do we think, Tommaso? What's running through your head?
All right. Once again, throwback to the Panini albums of when we were kids. There was one sticker that I couldn't find. In Italian, we call them figurine.
Okay.
And I had the entire Perugia team.
Right.
And this guy, all of my friends, they had him. I didn't. It was Nakata. Do you remember Nakata?
Yes.
The Japanese player?
Yeah.
So the first, when I think about Perugia in the 1990s, I think about Nakata, which kind of makes sense. I think 1977, that could be his year. You said he was only the second player from his country to play in Italy. I don't know if there was another Japanese playing before him in Italy, but I do know that at some point he went to England. I do not know where. My guess, as of now,